Good evening and welcome to the Friday night edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, Gitmo, guns, and giving up. President Obama got a $1 trillion gift from the House earlier today as that body passed the omnibus spending bill. It still needs to pass the Senate, but President Obama isn't sticking around. He's on Air Force One heading to Hawaii for his Christmas vacation. He did stick around long enough, though, to tell the press he will continue to press for the closure of Gitmo and what he perceives as a loophole on guns. Meantime, back on Capitol Hill, new Speaker Paul Ryan tries to fight the conservative perception that he got rolled.
But we are where we are, and we have a bipartisan compromise where, by the way, I think we've got some good wins. And look, Democrats won some things, too. That's the nature of bipartisan compromises. And so the way I look at this is we have made the best of the situation we have.
We will wait until Congress has definitively said no to a well-thought-out plan with numbers attached to it before we say anything definitive about my executive authority here. I think it's far preferable if I can get stuff done with Congress.
But, and you could almost fill in the blank, but if I don't, I can't wait for the Constitution. I'll just do it myself. That's the attitude the president has, and in one sense, who can really blame him, giving the Republicans rolling over today? Well, one guy who may be very happy about this is joining us from Newsmax, New York, noted political commentator Ellis Henican. Ellis, it's great to have you back on Newsmax Prime, and I just have to ask you, in the wake of the last midterm, did you think that President Obama would just say, I got a pen, I got a phone, I'm going to do what I want from my point of view, and to heck with the Congress, I'm going to act like nothing has changed?
I'm not nearly as offended by it as you sound to be, JD. First of all, let me give you credit on one thing. I love the phrase ominous omnibus. Did you make that up?
As a matter of fact, I wish I could claim credit, but from personal experience, I know about those bills in previous years when we couldn't get things quite ready to work with Bill Clinton when he was in the White House. And it is always tough to be fair to the 150 Republicans who voted for it. It's always tough when you got some things you think are really good. The question becomes, does the bad outweigh the good? Now, from my vantage point, 1.6 billion to fund and accommodate continued illegal immigration through 2018, that is BAD bad. Money for refugee resettlement in the wake of San Bernardino, I don't care what party you're from, that is horrendous. And so that's what I see there. But tell me what you see good about the bill, Ellis.
Well, let me give you an alternate view on that, JD. First of all, I think I'm in favor of functioning government. I like the idea of government, both parties getting together, finding some kind of way to find some ground in the middle where things actually happen. You know, JD, we have lived for so long with gridlock, with an inability of Washington to confront any of the major problems that we face in this nation. Yeah, I got to tell you, this Paul Ryan guy is like a breath of fresh air. He actually believes in governing.
Well, no, there's another part of governing, Ellis, and it's not refusing to work within the process. You have to understand what has happened for the bulk of his time in office. President Obama has refused to follow regular order. When Harry Reid was running the Senate, he said, don't bother taking up the appropriations bills. We'll just punt everything to the end of the year, and then we'll have an omnibus bill. He has loved using that. And so what you call responsible governing, I'll say it this way, since you want to be bipartisan, it takes both parties observing existing law and regular order to get things done, and that's not happened. But Ellis, I just want you to hear something. It may bring yet more joy to your soul. Rush Limbaugh, on his radio program, had, I'll be diplomatic, say it was an interesting take on this bill and just how Capitol Hill Republicans handled it. Take a listen.
Betrayed is not even the word here. What has happened here is worse than betrayal, and betrayal's pretty bad, but it's worse than that. There is no Republican Party. You know, we don't even need a Republican Party if we're going to do this. You know, just elect Democrats, disband the Republican Party, let the Democrats run it, because that's what's happening anyway.
So, Ellis, some frustration among conservatives about this, but your chance now to get us on the right track, speaking from the vantage point of the left.
The only thing that's really changed is Paul Ryan, right? I mean, we've got the same president. We have the same breakdown in the House and the Senate. The one thing that we have now is Paul Ryan, who I think you'd concede is a smart guy. No one could possibly question his conservative credentials. I mean, he has served his party loyally. But I think he recognizes, J.D., what a lot of Americans do, which is that people are sick of government that can't do anything. And the only way you can get something done in divided government is to find some middle ground. And that's what this is. This is not some crazy give it all to the left plan. This is governing in the middle. And you know, you're going to lose a few. And I understand people like Rush way off on the extreme are going to say, oh, this is traitorous and horrible because we didn't get everything we wanted.
It is not,
but that's not governing.
It is not extreme to ask the laws to be enforced. It is not extreme in the wake of San Bernardino to say, hold on a second with refugee resettlement. And after what happened yesterday in front of Jason Chaffetz's committee, Government Reform and Oversight, it is not extreme to say, wait a minute, the bureaucracy at the Department of Homeland Security is acting like an idiocracy. 10,000 visa holders identified with ties to terror, and they don't know where they are. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Vegetarian. This is a fundamental disconnection. It is not sobriety and governing responsibly, Ellis.
Well, it might surprise you to know, J.D., that some people don't agree with that litany that you just offered to us. A lot of people like me and many Americans feel like, hey, the problem here isn't refugees from Syria. I mean, we have a genuine issue here, but you know, we don't just want to slam the doors and give up everything that makes America great out of some momentary, fleeting fear. That's not what we are as Americans. And you know, listen, I understand people disagree. You're not going to get everything you want. In the end, by the way, this legal concern you have, people will file lawsuits about it. The courts will decide ultimately, and indeed, the president does have some power under the law to act. I sure hope he acts.
Well, I'm sure you can hardly wait, and I can hardly wait for a new president, which brings me to the discussion of the presidential campaign yesterday. Yesterday, it was somewhat more than passing curious. Russian President Vladimir Putin saying nice things about Donald Trump. Here's what Donald Trump had to say with my old congressional colleague Joe Scarborough on MSNBC's Morning Joe earlier today.
Sure. When people call you brilliant, it's always good, especially when the person heads up Russia.
So well, it's nice to hear that. But you know what's interesting? Dick Morris was on this program last night. He said, actually, this whole notion of mutual respect redounds to the Donald's favor in the campaign. Do you agree?
You know, it may. I think that, I hate to say that Dick is right, because I think Dick is often not, but maybe there's some. You know, I'll give you an example, Jetty. It would be like if I complimented you in a very enthusiastic way. On the one hand, you'd like the way it sounded, and on the other hand, you'd say, like, wait a second, what are my friends going to think if Ellis agrees with me?
Oh, Ellis, that's a poor analogy, because you know we may disagree vehemently, but we are very good friends, and I'm often talking to you about your role in the pantheon of pop culture, voicing one of my favorite cartoons. At any rate, let me get back to something right here. Donald Trump, in the debate the other night, facing attacks from Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush calls him the chaos candidate. You'll recall early in the campaign, Trump was pressured to sign a pledge, but now that he did, suddenly it seems that Jeb Bush and other establishment figures are going to be reluctant to endorse Trump. Where does that leave the Republican establishment and Team Bush in your eyes, Ellis?
It's ironic, isn't it? Because they all thought that the issue was going to be Donald, and really the issue turns out to be the establishment folks. Listen, I think that it's more and more likely that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. I mean, I understand Ted Cruz is rising, and Marco can make his claim. The rest of them, I think, are pretty much out of it to one extent or another. But I think Republicans need to figure out what it's going to mean to have a nominee like Donald. You know, who do you run as the vice president? What happens then?
Yeah, here's the thing, though. A Jeb supporter was quoted saying he'd rather vote for Hillary than vote for Trump. That's got to please you.
There will be some of that.
Last 15 seconds. You think that's going to happen, huh?
I think it's, listen, who knows, right? Politics is long, and thankfully, because it gives us something to talk about. But you tell me who you think is a more likely nominee at this point. I don't think you can put anyone in front of Trump. He's my guy, predictively speaking.
Well, that's interesting. You know, it's been an interesting conversation, Ellis, and it will make headlines. Liberal Ellis Henican predicts Donald Trump to win Republican nomination. But right now, you know what?
Happen. Bring him on.
It looks that way, and I just remind you, be careful what you ask for, because that's what a lot of people were saying in 1980 when a guy named Reagan was nominated by the Republicans. Ellis Henican, thanks so much for your time. You heard what Ellis had to say. Agree or disagree? Send us your comments at newsmaxtv.com/comments. Ed Klein has a book out saying she's unlikable, but is she unelectable? And what about Bernie Sanders and his spat with the Democrats? All that's next.